Tisab, whenever you're ready, inshallah.
Okay, and you can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, all right, Bismillah. الحمد لله الذي هدى والصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى خصوصا على سيد الرسل وخاتم الأنبياء وعلى آله وصحبه الذين اجتباه أما بعد. We are now on the third of the 5-part series on Islamic wealth management, and specifically around investing, savings, and raising capital. Now, the previous discussions, initially we started off with certain principles that apply across all the different parts in this workshop. And then the discussion last week was a bit more focused on the investing within the stock markets and the mutual funds and such. And now we're going to get a bit more into some financing models. Okay? And then once we talk about the financing models, then we'll get more into some of the applications. Okay? But before we kind of get into that, some quick logistical points first. Hopefully, you have joined one of the 2 sessions already, ideally both. So then these logistics. We will take questions, but we'll take them through Slido. That way, we can take those questions that have been voted on the most, that they're the most relevant for most people. And I do ask that you make your questions pertain to the topics that are covered and not the topics that haven't been covered or that are completely tangential or unrelated. It's not a general Q&A. It is questions to seek clarification on the discussion that we are having and the topics that we are covering. And generally, it's a good idea to wait until the end of the session. That way, maybe a question that you have is something that's going to be covered later on anyway. So it's best that you wait until the end of the session. If you do end up asking a question, you realize it's been covered, then you can withdraw the question as well. And later on in the day, when you see other people have posted their questions as well, do feel free to go and vote on those questions. That way, when we do take Q&A, we can take the ones that are relatively the most important to most people. Okay. Also, just the quick standard disclaimer. I won't go into the details here, but you've already hopefully seen this in one of the 2 discussions. There are certain topics that are off, that we're not going to cover, like zakat's a big one. We're not going to cover that, and I'm not going to make any personal recommendations on, one company or app or otherwise over another. This is more for you to understand the concepts and the right application, and then you decide on where you think is the best investment strategy for yourself. That's not my job to give those personal recommendations. And finally, I've kind of talked about this in more detail previously, but I'll just suffice here to say that again, I'm not part of any company or otherwise sponsored or have any other relation to any organization that you may connect any of these concepts and financing models with. I really don't have any financial or any other interest here. Okay. Now, that stated, we spoke about principles and investments, and today we're going to talk about financing models. And it was kind of like the principles and then the investments approach, where we're first going to talk about concept and then do application. Financing models are going to talk about the concepts of the various different financing models. And then in subsequent sessions, that's when we'll get into how do you apply those financing models for asset financing, for masjid financing, for business financing as well. Okay? So, but before we can get into those specific type of financing, we have to understand the models themselves. Okay? And the discussion that we'll have, will highlight opportunities for both small investors and small businesses, or even medium, mid-sized businesses as well. These financing models will apply kind of on both ends of the spectrum, like for both sides of the marketplace, both the investors and then also the businesses. It will apply for both. Okay. I do want to also note that we are going to talk about these models in their concept and a high-level concept. We're not going to go into the details and into the weeds of the details of the contractual setup and the different clauses that need to go in there or cannot go in there and such. That level of detail is kind of beyond the scope of this discussion here and the purpose of the discussion here. The point here is to give you the ideas, but then you kind of to hash out the details and to draft the actual contract, you need to go to Abrar to kind of get that level of detail then. And I have in the past and individually as well, and with the Abrar where I am, we have advised people on how to both edit existing contracts for Sharia compliance and also helped Muslim businesses draft contracts from scratch. We've done both, and we don't charge. Like, I don't charge for these services, neither directly nor in the form of suggested donations or otherwise. This is really just for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And finally, I will also mention that the financing models we're going to talk about, there are going to be many of them, but it's not a comprehensive list either, right? There are going to be some financing models that we're not going to speak about for various reasons, including that some of them just take up more of a disproportionate amount of time to fully explain and apply correctly, right? They're just kind of more detailed, and will just take up a lot of time for that one model. So just note that these are some and actually several financing models. You can even say most of the financing models, but they're not necessarily all financing models. Okay. Now, with that stated, and hopefully that you have gone to the Slido link, slide.do/Abrar. So with that, then just quick poll, just to make sure that you're all able to connect to the Slido, which is where we'll take questions from. Which of the following describes your purpose of attending? Okay. Given what we're talking about today, just kind of general education, general knowledge, or you are actually interested in investing capital in a business, or you have a business or looking to start a business and are interested in raising capital, or otherwise. Okay. And you can select more than one here. I'll just give it like 10, 15 more seconds for the votes to come in. It'll give us a good idea of kind of what the audience's end goal is. Okay. All right. So most people are interested in kind of general education, but we do have a good amount of people. In fact, more than half the people attending are interested in actually investing capital in a business, which is good. Alhamdulillah. We do need that. And it's higher than I expected, actually, mashallah, for the number of people who are also interested in raising capital for a business. So alhamdulillah, it seems like we have a good mix of people who are kind of interested in general knowledge, as well as potential investors, and also business folk who are looking to either grow, expand, or start a business. Alhamdulillah. With that, we'll kind of get right into the different financing models. And the first one we'll talk about here is murabaha. And for all these, I'll give you the Arabic name because you're going to hear that Arabic name a lot. And actually, the Arabic names, the Arabic words here, do have a set definition and details with it that an English translation doesn't necessarily do justice to that. It may translate the name, but it doesn't necessarily include all the right concepts. But just to make sure it's easier, we'll give you the Arabic and then the English translation as well. But you should try to get more used to the actual terminology here. So a murabaha is a cost plus sale. Okay. It's not really a financing model in concept, right? As it's just a one-time transaction, and it's a reflection of how that transaction was concluded. Okay, all that reflects is that the cost or the markup on the item that was sold was disclosed at the time of the sale. That's all that really means in a murabaha, right? It's just a reflection of how a sale was concluded. Yeah, and this can be with payment that's required on spot or on an installment plan. And generally, when we talk about, and almost always when we're talking about murabaha in a financing model setup, it's always going to be where the payment from the client's side is not on spot, but rather it's going to be in installments. Okay? So if the seller discloses what their cost was, or they associate the price that they're selling to their cost, or they declare what their markup is, then that type of a sale is called a murabaha. It's a cost plus sale. Okay. So for example, you go somewhere, you negotiate the price on clothing at a store, right? And the seller says that, listen, my cost is X and I'm only marking this up by Y. Okay, so the seller says, you want to buy, this dress, our cost, my cost for this dress is, $30, and I'm selling it for 40. Okay, I can't make it any cheaper because I only have a $10 markup here. Okay, this sale is a murabaha transaction. Okay, because it just means that the seller is telling you that I am selling this item to you at my cost plus X markup or Y% markup. Okay, either X dollar markup or Y% markup. That again, it's just simply a reflection of the type of sale, right? It's not an investment model in of itself. Okay, and when a transaction is concluded, either the cost is not disclosed, which is kind of you go to Walmart, you buy something, Walmart doesn't tell you what their cost is, or somebody sells you something and they tell you, I'm selling this at cost. Okay, somebody says, I bought this to give as a gift to someone, and they said they don't want it, so I'm just trying to get rid of it, so I'm willing to give this to you at cost. That's a type of transaction. Or someone says, I'm only marking up X on this, right? That's a murabaha. Okay? That's a murabaha transaction. Now, this is used, though, even though it's not ideally meant as a financing model, it is used as a safe financing model, and it is permissible if it's done correctly. Okay, since it is a one-time sale, the purchaser owes the full amount no matter how quickly he pays. Okay, and the change in the value of the commodity he purchased or any of the financial difficulty, regardless of anything, it's a one-time sale. So in this shot here that you see, this chart, somebody selling a product for $250,000. Now the client doesn't have $250,000 to get it from the seller, so now they involve a financier. Okay, now the financier goes to the seller and says, okay, I will sell this to you, or I will buy this from you for $250,000, and they acquire it. Okay, then they mark it up 10%, and then they sell it to the client for $275,000, and the client now has the option to pay in installments over, X period, 15 years, 30 years, whatever the case there may be, right? So that's the murabaha transaction. Okay? And it's important to note here that the financier must purchase the asset from the seller, must own and possess it, and then resell it, right? Otherwise, it violates that principle number 4 that we spoke about, which is that you cannot sell what you do not own and possess. So here, the financier must actually purchase and own it and possess it. The liability of the item comes upon them, even if for a short duration, right? And usually it's a matter of minutes. It's just really a matter of minutes, usually the way these things happen, where the financier will purchase from the seller and then will turn around and then sell it to the client, okay? But they should, and they do get liability in that case for, even if it's just a matter of a few minutes, but they must own and possess, and the liability comes upon them, right? Otherwise, we spoke about the principle number 1, which is investments are, asset-backed and risk-based and such. Right? It cannot be that the financier at no point has any liability whatsoever, even for a short duration of time. That cannot happen, right? If a financier does not own and possess first, and does not take any liability at any point, then what's simply happening then is that the financier is advancing a loan, and the quote unquote markup is interest, right? If these steps don't happen, if the client is really acquiring directly from the seller, then the financier is essentially loaning the $250,000 to the client. The client gives that $250,000 to the seller, and now the client then pays back that principal of $250,000 and the interest, 10% of that, that amount as interest. That's what ends up happening. Okay? So the murabaha works if these steps are followed properly. Okay? One thing I will clarify, because it was one of the questions that came up on Slido, was that when we talk about possession, we're talking about either physical or constructive possession. Okay? Meaning physical possession is, it's easy, you actually take the possession. Constructive possession is something is, that there's nothing preventing you from taking physical possession, or you have an agent that takes possession on your behalf. Okay, so for example, you bought a car and you finish all the paperwork, and now the keys are on the desk in front of you, and you can take the keys and go to the car and drive off. Okay, even though you haven't physically taken possession of the car yet, but the seller has done everything to allow you to take it, and there's nothing that prevents you from doing so. That's constructive possession. Okay, so either you have to take either physical possession or constructive possession, or the financier appoints somebody as their agent to take possession. Then when the agent takes the possession, it's as if the financier has taken possession. Okay, that's the first. That's murabaha. Okay, then we move on to musharaka, which is essentially partnership. Okay, and this table on the right, you may recall this table. We use this table when we're explaining some principles in the first session. Okay, in a partnership, remember, as a partner, you have the right, to a potential profit, and at the same time, you have an obligation to share the risk in a potential loss as well. Okay, and you must be willing to accept that there is no guaranteed profit. Okay, and you must be willing to accept that there is a potential loss. There's no guarantee that there will be a profit, and there's no guarantee that there will not be any loss. Okay? If there's a profit, you will have a share in it. If there's a loss, you will have a share in it. Okay? And a partner cannot be allocated, a set monthly payment, neither fixed nor as a percentage of any invested capital or such. Okay? In an asset-backed, risk-based investment, you cannot be guaranteed money for simply advancing money, right? We spoke about that principle number 5, that partners agree on a profit ratio, it should say, and the loss ratio is tied to capital contribution. So you cannot fix, right? Even though there's this desire for a guaranteed fixed profit, okay, that's wrong. The Islamic financing doesn't work that way, right? And it's actually this desire for a guaranteed fixed profit that often leads to these Ponzi schemes. Okay? If someone promises you X% return on investment, right, an X% return on whatever capital you provide, that's essentially just a loan with interest, and it's haram. Okay? And if someone promises you X% business profit on investments at some cadence, right, that you're going to get, that you're guaranteed to get, 10% profit every month, or you're guaranteed to get $300 a month in profit. Okay? That guarantee makes that transaction both haram and also makes us highly suspicious. Okay, that someone can guarantee you those returns. At the Dar es Salaam retreat in 2019, so last year, I had a discussion, or a talk on the topic of combating corruption, and the videos on Dar es Salaam's YouTube channel. You can take a look at it after the program. But I discussed there about this corruption and the Ponzi schemes that happen, and a $44 million Ponzi scheme that specifically targeted the religious Muslim community of Chicago. Okay, not a general, but specifically the religious Muslim community of Chicago. $44 million Ponzi scheme, right? And people lost, some people lost their entire life savings. Okay, anytime you hear of these guaranteed returns, know that Islamically that's going to be problematic, and in general you should just be very suspicious of that. Okay? Profit can be mutually agreed upon. Profit will be mutually agreed upon, but the loss will be on the percent of ownership of each partner. Okay? And you may recall we spoke about partners who are active in the business may be compensated with a higher profit ratio than their percentage of capital. And those partners who are silent, meaning they're not active in the business, they're not doing work for their business, they've simply provided capital, their profit ratio cannot be greater than their percent of the ownership or their percent of the capital contribution. Okay? So this table on the right, you may recall these two partners, 60-40% ownership, and if one of them is silent, the other one's active. Instead of a 60-40 profit, they may say profit's going to be 50-50, or they may say profit will be 60-40, but profit cannot be 65-35, for example, because this partner is silent. The loss ratio will be 60-40, and that's non-negotiable. Now, third, okay, it's an extension of partnership, but this is now diminishing musharaka, or a diminishing partnership. Okay? A diminishing partnership is same as a partnership, except that one or more partners' share is bought out over time until they're no longer a partner. Okay, so in this example, okay, you see that Zaid and Fatima, they go, they both invest, and they both are partners in a business. However, Zaid's the one who eventually just wants to really run the business, and Fatima was more of someone who's just contributing capital, right? She's more of an investor. Okay, so Zaid put 20% down, Fatima put the 80%, and in year one, Zaid owns 20%, Fatima owns 80%, and they may decide, that we'll keep profit and ratio at the 20-80 share. Okay, so Zaid will have 20% of the profit in the business, Fatima will have 80%, and if there's a loss, then Zaid has to account for 20% of that loss, and Fatima will account for 80% of that loss. Okay, now as a partner's share decreases, then their share in the potential loss will decrease, definitely, but then their profit ratio can also decrease as well. Okay, so for example, they may agree that every year Zaid will purchase 10% more of the business. Okay, so then in year two, Zaid has purchased from Fatima 10% of the business. So now Zaid is 30% owner, Fatima 70% owner in the business, and the profit ratio and the loss ratio may be 30-70 as well. Okay, you get to year three, it's 40-60, year four, 50-50, and then eventually when you get to year 9, then Zaid becomes 100% owner, and Fatima has essentially been bought out from the business, right? This is a diminishing musharaka, diminishing partnership. The goal, usually in this case, and when we, in the next session, we'll talk about what are the different use cases in the scenarios where the different types of models are used. But in this case, clearly Fatima is somebody who is more interested in contributing the capital and earning a profit, but not somebody who wants to be a long-term permanent owner in the business. Okay, so that's how diminishing musharaka works. Okay. Now, move on to the next one, which is mudaraba. Okay. Now, mudaraba doesn't have any good, accurate English translation to go with it. Okay. It is a type of partnership where one party contributes capital and the other party contributes skill. Okay. And this is perfect for those who have skill but lack finances. Okay. And it's also perfect for those who have finances but lack the skill or desire to actually do the work. Okay. So for example, they may, somebody's, already, has a professional, full-time job, or has some other work that they're not willing to leave, or they lack the required skills to run a business, but they're looking and they're interested in investing capital. Okay. Now they need somebody who has the skills to do the work, right? So, an easy example here would be one person is interested in starting a restaurant, but they don't have the cooking skills, right? They're not a chef by profession, but they're just a business person who's interested in starting a restaurant. Now, there's somebody else who's a good chef, but they don't have the capital to start a business. They don't have the capital to start a restaurant. Okay. Now, this is an example where one person has the capital and the other person has the skills. Okay. So now they may go into this partnership, if you will, together, but in this partnership, only one person's actually providing the capital. The other person's providing the skill. Okay. And another example, our application here is, women who have, mahr and savings that are sitting idle, in a bank account. Okay. And, they they say, like our money's sitting idle and every year we pay zakat on it and that money is just simply reducing and so on. Okay, unless their husbands are paying their zakat on their behalf, that's different. But generally, if there's zakats, they're saying that our money is just decreasing because it's sitting idle. It's not meant to be sitting idle. It's meant to be invested. Okay. Now, these women, they may not be interested, for example, in operating a business or getting involved in a business. They're just simply looking to invest. Okay. So there's another example where if there's somebody else in the community who has the skills but is looking for capital, they can go into this partnership together where one person simply provides the capital and the other one's running the business. Okay. And the one who invests capital does not have a right to involve themselves in the business, okay, except for providing some broad parameters. Okay? So for example, if one person may have the capital to invest and another has skills on wealth management, okay? So the capital provider may say, the application here is, I have money that I want to invest. I don't know where to invest it and when to. I don't want to be in the business of checking the stock market and seeing how things are performing and what events may be coming up and when I need to pull back and invest more or shift funds between different companies and such. I don't have the time for that. I don't have the skills for that, but I have savings that need to be invested. Okay. And there's somebody else who is really good at following the stock market, knowing when to invest where and how much and so on. Okay. So then I may provide the capital to that person or to that company. I may provide that capital and say, look, here's my capital and you provide your skills, but here's some broad parameters of how I want you to go about doing this. So for example, I want you to invest in halal companies. I want you to invest in socially responsible companies. I want you to invest in companies that are not involved in liquor or gambling or X, Y, and Z. Okay, some generic broader guidelines, parameters that I provide, and then thereafter that person who provides the skill, they make all the decisions on how to go about doing the business, how to operate the business. Okay, the capital provider cannot get involved in the operations of the business. They can't say that, I want you to invest in Apple, or I want you to invest in Microsoft, or I want you to invest in this specific company, or I want you to do this specific work, right? Buy this specific merchandise from this specific seller, right? They can't do that. That's operational. Those operational aspects are the sole responsibility of the one who's providing the skill. The person who's providing the capital simply provides the capital and some broad generic guidelines. Okay, and then the profit is shared between them at an agreed upon rate. Okay, whatever they decide. Okay, so 70-10, 60-40, or sorry, 70-30, 90-10, 60-40, 50-50, whatever they decide, whoever's getting how much ever, it's completely mutually agreed upon. However, remember that same principle applies, that principle number 5, where the loss ratio is going to be tied to the capital contribution. Okay? So in this case, who provides the capital, or what's the capital share? The capital provider, right? The investor is providing 100% of the capital, and the other person is only providing their skill. So then what that means is that if there is any loss that is, not intentional, not because of gross negligence, right? There's no ill intent that was involved here or such, right? There's no corrupt acts or such that were involved here. Just generally, the person made their effort and, there was a loss to the business. In that case, if there is a loss, then that is entirely borne by the capital provider, okay? Because their share of the capital is 100%. So if there's a loss, that loss will be 100% theirs, okay? Yes, I mean, if there was gross negligence or anything that was illegal or inappropriate, incorrect or such, then that's a different scenario. But just genuinely, the person tried and there was no, there was a loss, then that's entirely borne by the investor, the one who's providing the capital. Okay? The loss for the, for the one who's providing the skill, the worker, is that they've put in effort and they didn't get anything out from it, right? So they invested time, they invested energy in something, and then there was no payout from that, right? So that's kind of their loss from it. But there's none of the monetary loss is borne by them. Okay. What's also important here is that the profit ratio is fixed between the two. Okay. The one who's working, the one who's providing the skill, cannot have any fixed returns. They cannot have any fixed income. Okay. So there's no, 10% of capital for them, or a guaranteed minimum $500 per month or such. Okay. There's no set income for them. If there is a profit, then they have a share. Right? If there's no profit, then there's nothing that they get. Okay. Now, at this point, I'll pause, and you can start to think of how some of these different concepts can start to combine together. Okay, and we'll do more of the practical application later on, but you can start to see how this happens. Okay, like for example, okay, we spoke about partnership. Okay, so we spoke about the musharaka, the partnership. You can apply that in a mudaraba, where if one person doesn't have the sufficient capital to provide, there may be a partnership where multiple people pool their capital together. Okay? And then they together as one company, as one partnership, take on the role of the one who's providing the capital. Okay? So the one who's providing the capital may not be one person. It may be multiple people who are in a partnership amongst themselves. Likewise, the one who's providing the skill may also not be one person. It may be a partnership of multiple people who come together and pool their skills together in order to operate that business. Okay? So it may not be as simple as two people here, right? One capital provider and one skill provider. It may be a partnership of people who provide the capital and a partnership of people who provide the skills. Okay? Likewise, if we look at diminishing musharaka, we can apply that here with mudaraba as well, where now the people who are providing the capital, like the pool of people who are providing the capital are in this business, one of them may be a person who are multiple, out of the 10 people, maybe 3 of them are people who are interested in being long-term part of this business. Okay, long-term owners and part of this business. Whereas the other 7 partners who are providing capital may simply be in it for the short-term payout, but they're not interested in the long-term business, for example. Okay, so then you can combine this diminishing musharaka, where the same thing happens on the capital side. Okay, where somebody provide 20% of the capital and somebody else provide 80% of the capital. Together, they are the capital providers, and then there's somebody else who's providing the skill. And then every year, one of the partners is buying out the share of the other partners. So they're paying them the market value of their share of the business and gaining and increasing their share in the business eventually until they reach 100%. So these concepts are not necessarily all mutually exclusive, where if mudaraba applies, then partnership musharaka cannot apply, or if mudaraba applies, then diminishing musharaka cannot apply, right? Some of these do actually come together to make, I won't say more complex, but in many cases more practical solutions. Okay, it's not always that you will have one person who can provide the capital or one person who can provide all the necessary skills. Okay. Okay. Moving on. Okay. Ijara, okay, means leasing or hiring. Okay. Now, similar to murabaha, okay, ijara in itself is not necessarily a financing model. Okay, this is an example of ijara. Simple is you lease out your apartment to a tenant. Okay, it's not really a financing model, But ijara is important to understand because it gets combined with other financing models. Okay, so some of these financing models, if they stand alone, aren't as practical as opposed to if they combine with other financing models. Okay, and in the application that we will see later on, you will see that ijara, leasing, is a financing, or it's a model that will combine with diminishing musharaka. Okay? That, sorry to keep flipping on you. Diminishing musharaka and ijara will come together to form a richer financing model, a more practical financing model. Okay, we'll see kind of the application of that. Okay? And this becomes clear when we do the application, inshallah. Okay. Now, ijara muntahiya bitamlik. Okay. A long Arabic name. It means, essentially that it's a lease to own type of a contract. Now, again, this is now, we have taken something that was, like ijara in of itself wasn't something that, as we talked about on the previous slide, something that was a financing model. We've taken ijara and we've sort of converted it into a financing model, and which is fine if it's applied correctly. But this is an example where we're going to take ijara, and which is not in of itself a financing model, and now convert it into being a method of financing, if you will. Okay, so not something that's ideal, but something that can still be permissible and can work. Okay, so a person generally leases something over time, and in this lease to own model, which a person generally leases something. So you have the lessee, he's leasing something, or he or she is leasing something from the lessor, from the one who's leasing it out. And what happens is then the lessor, the one who's leasing it out, right, the owner of the asset, what they do is they take a binding promise to sell the asset to the lessee at the end of the fixed term. Okay, at the end of the term for some fixed amount. Okay, so if this is a 10-year or 3-year contract, for example, then the person's leasing for 3 years, and at the end of 3 years, then they have the option to now purchase the asset if they wish. Okay, they don't. The lessee is not bound to purchase it. They simply have the option to purchase it. But the lessor, they made a binding promise on themselves to sell it, so they're bound to sell it, but the lessee is not bound to purchase it. Okay, the other way this occurs is the lessor, instead of promising to sell it at the end of the term, promises to simply gift it at the end of the term. Okay, so at the end of the term, this asset, I will just gift it to you at the end, right? And if you think of a financing company, they're not necessarily always interested in owning these assets, right? They're just looking for the kind of the profit from it, if you will. So at the end of the term, they want to rid of the asset because it's hard for them to find now another person who's going to be interested in that used asset over this longer period of term. Okay. In this scenario here, you can see that it looks similar to the diminishing musharaka model. But note that when we spoke about diminishing musharaka, right, there was this gradual increase in ownership over time until there was complete ownership. In ijara, that's not happening. Okay, if a person is paying $1,500 a month, for example, the lessee is paying $1,500 for rent. Okay, the entire $1,500 is going for rent in year 1, and in year 2, and in year 3, and in year 4, until you get to year N, whatever the fixed, whatever the duration of the contract there is. At the end of their term, at the end of the contract, then the lessee has the option, but not the obligation, okay, to purchase this asset for some minimum amount of price, right, to pay for the acquisition. So they pay some minimum amount and they acquire this asset now. Okay? Or if this is a model where the lessor is promising to gift it, then even this isn't there. Really, at the end of the term, they just get it as a gift from the lessor. Okay, it's important to note that this promise to sell from the lessor to sell this asset or to gift it is not contractually stipulated, meaning it's not in the same contract as the contract of lease. Rather, it's an independent document. Okay, so even if the promise may be legally enforceable, it's not the same as being a clause within the contract, if you will. Okay, this promise is separate than the contract. Okay, and there's a difference between a condition within the contract versus a promise that is outside of the contract. Even if both are legally enforceable, due to certain rulings and implications that come out that are different from each. I mean, this isn't, this it's not the place to kind of go into the details of that. It's not necessary to go into those details here, but do note that generally that promise will be separate than the actual leasing contract. Okay. Now, istisna. Istisna is a custom order, essentially. Again, this is something that is not in of itself a financing model. Okay, it's like murabaha. It's not meant to be a financing model, but it can be used to facilitate certain type of financing models. Okay, it's just not simply, it's a sale. Okay, it's a sale of something that you have requested to be custom built for you. Okay? Now note that, remember when we spoke about principle number 4, we said you cannot sell something that you do not own and possess. Okay, istisna here, this custom order type of a sale, is an exception to that rule. Okay? This is an exception to that rule. I mean, what's happening? If, for example, you request that you want to, you have custom furniture that's being built for you, for example. Okay, or you have a custom house that is being built for you, or whatever you're building, that's customized to you. It's a sale. You're paying, or you're entering into a transaction where you're buying this item that will be now custom made for you. So at the time of purchase, you have bought something that, let alone possess, is not even in existence really. Okay, but this is an exception to the rule, and this is one of those cases where you actually end up selling something that you don't own and possess, right? So the person who's taking the order, they are selling something that they're going to really custom make in the future to provide to this person. Okay. Now we will see later on of how this model, or how this is used in conjunction with other financing models to create solutions, inshallah. And then finally, the last one that we will speak about here is something that's known as ja'ala. It's also in Arabic known as ju'ala or ji'ala as well. But essentially it means brokerage, or it means commission. This AOFI, like a lot of the books don't discuss this as well. AOFI does actually a good job of explaining the concept of ja'ala and how it's different than regular ijara and regular hiring. It's similar in concept, but it's not the same. It's different. Okay, in this case, really what happens is you are offering compensation if a task is completed. Okay. It's similar to hiring, but there's some differences, right? You don't necessarily have to give details of what needs to be done. You don't have to provide all those details. It's not a binding contract in the sense that, it's not that you have contracted someone to do some specific task, right? You have put it out there to say, whoever does this, if somebody does this and whoever does this, or whoever is the first one to do this, then they get a certain type of a reward, or they get a certain amount of benefit for it that you're willing to offer, some compensation if a task is completed. Okay? And an easy example to think about this, is perhaps from the Old West, or even happens nowadays as well, for all the wanted signs, right? Like the wanted dead or alive, the Old West kind of signs, or even today, there's signs about monetary award for information leading to the arrest of some criminal, or monetary award for whoever finds the missing cat or dog or what person save us from that, from those sort of difficulties. But that sort of compensation that's offered if someone is able to get this work done. Nobody may do it, nobody's bound to do it, but if someone does it, then there's a certain reward that comes with it. Okay, you can also kind of recognize this model from the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. In the case where the brother of Yusuf alayhi salam had come and they had hid something in his bag, and the people are asking about what are you looking for and such. They mentioned that قالوا نفقد صواع الملك ولمن جاء به حمل بعير وأنا به زعيم. Right? They said that we are missing the bowl of the king, and they say that whoever produces it, whoever is able to find it, then there's a reward of a camel load for them. Right? There's whoever finds it gets a reward. Okay, no one's hired to do the job of searching for it. Okay, but if someone's able to find it and whoever finds it, they will get this reward for it. Okay, and Anabi Zarim, right, that I'm bound by it. I'm firm on that. So that if somebody does do the task, then you do have to offer the compensation. Okay? So those are kind of various models, and inshallah, we will then start to apply these on how they practically work and how do we practically solution for these. Okay, but at this point, the goal is to make sure that everyone understands the concepts, even if you're not sure how do I apply this practically for raising capital, or how do I practically apply this in asset financing or budget financing or asset acquisition and such. Don't worry about it. At this time, the point is you should understand just the concept. Okay. So with that, if you go to Slido, I do want to get an understanding of kind of where everyone is, right? So even if you don't understand all the practical applications, do you understand the financing models, right? That you get all of it, or you get most of it, or you feel overwhelmed. Okay, so alhamdulillah, seems like most people do get most of it. Okay, good. Okay, just give me 1 second. I'm going to switch to the Q&A and we'll take some questions, inshallah. Okay. Okay. Questions, and again, these are questions that we're taking from Slido. Okay, so do post your questions there, and do vote for questions there. Okay. How should we approach 5 to 9 education savings plan? We didn't really go into these or into that discussion, but I would recommend the American Fiqh Academy actually has a resolution on college saving plans, the 5 to 9 education savings plan that's being referred to in the question here. That I suggest that you read the resolution there, inshallah. Okay. So, 1 second, let me find my cursor. Okay. Are there investment companies and apps that are AOFI compliant and we can use instead of standard platforms like Acorns or Stash? There are multiple options for the Muslim community, actually. There's both companies, and then there's like meaning the kind of the standard traditional approach of a mutual fund manager, if you will, and then also for apps that you can go and have a limited amount of selection that you can do. And again, to be very, very clear, I'm not recommending any, but if the question is what are the Muslim companies or apps that are out there, so then just as an FYI and just for information, not as a recommendation, Then there's Amana funds, there's Azad funds. These are kind of more there's just different ones, Islamic Dow Jones and such. There are multiple ones. You should be able to just even Google them and find them. There are also apps. So like I think we spoke about Wahid Invest, or I may have mentioned them. That's an example of an app that is catered for the Muslim community. And there may be other ones as well. And you can check them out. You can see what their investment strategy is and who are they investing in and what their performance is and what options they provide you and purification, right? That's an important aspect. Making sure that they do the purification and they do it correctly. You can look into all those, but these are examples of what's marketed to the Muslim community. You should look into kind of the details thereafter. Are we allowed to exercise day trading or short-term trading where we can buy and sell stocks in the same day or in a short period of time? So we did speak about stocks, and this is a good question. We didn't speak about day trading specifically, but you remember the principle where we spoke about that you must first purchase and own, and then you take possession of it, and then you resell it. Okay. In day trading, generally what happens is you may purchase a stock, but there's a period of time, usually T+2, like a couple of days before that transaction fully closes and you have possession of that stock. So if you're selling on the same day as the day that you're purchasing, then you're going to end up selling something that you haven't actually possessed yet. Okay, there is a couple of days of period before you gain possession of the item of those stocks, even though you may have ownership. So that's why day trading is not permissible. But reselling that stock once you get the possession of it, then that's fine. Okay. Stock options as a gift. How is it different than giving you a haram product as a gift and acceptance being permissible? This is related to in the previous session where we spoke about stock options and purchasing stock options, and puts and call options and such. And we said that's not permissible. And I did mention that if you get stock options through work, and I think there was a question about, those are not that they're not. I think the question mentioned that those are not a gift; they're part of your compensation package. I mean, in Islamic analysis, that is not your compensation. That is a gift. Yes, it's part of the benefits package, if you will, but that's not your salary is your fixed amount that you're going to get for the work that is done. Any of the bonuses and stock options are generally variant. Like if a company's performing well and you perform well, then you can get an X amount based off of your your performance, based off of the company performance and such. It's not necessarily a fixed amount. If someone does have a fixed amount of stock options in their contract, then that's different. But a lot of times it's offered as a, if you will, as a bonus or an incentive or such. So if you're given that as a gift, that's different than purchasing it, right? Like, or purchasing the haram product that the question is mentioning here. When you purchase a haram product, that product in of itself is a problem. Okay? Whereas the stock option, the option in of itself isn't the problem. It's the transaction that includes in acquiring that transaction is the problem. And you are, as the recipient of stock options, are not involved in that transaction. Okay? So it's different. I don't keep meaning to plug the American Fiqh Academy. I honestly don't. But a good example that you can kind of read here would be on life insurance. And I believe there was an example on life insurance, and we said that it was kind of off topic, so we're not going to cover it. But the American Fiqh Academy does have a resolution on employer-provided life insurance. Okay, so this is an example of something that if you purchase on your own, it's impermissible. But if the company provides it without you contributing toward it, then it's a different ruling. In that case, it would be permissible. So you can perhaps read the resolution on the life insurance to get an idea of how rulings can vary between when you purchase it yourself versus when something is given to you as a gift. Okay? Would it be possible to have a more detailed class on stocks? I feel it'd be very beneficial for the community. I will defer this to Darussalam. No, you don't have to. None of the admins have to comment on the spot, but I think the Darussalam members who are on the call can make a note of it, and inshallah it'd be up to them to offer the course, inshallah. Okay. There, I will mention that Darussalam does have a course on business transaction. I think it's an introduction to business transactions or financial transactions. I forget the exact name of the course, but it is it is a really good course that does talk about the kind of all the general concepts of financial transactions within Islam. Not kind of beyond, broader than just the specific home financing that most people think about when they talk about Islamic financing. The course does cover a broader set of topics. It is alhamdulillah, using content that I had the chance to write, and I think at least this past semester it was taught by a student of mine, alhamdulillah. So it is a good course that Darussalam does offer. I don't know if they're going to offer it next semester, but it may be offered again next year. But you should look into that course as well as a good option. Somebody's 401k has minimal choice of equity funds. Most of them have to 10% in financial industry stocks. Would that be permissible? We spoke about this a bit yesterday, that it would be permissible. Doesn't mean that 100% of financial industry is haram income. What that would mean is that some percent of that 2 to 10% maybe is likely going to be something that you need to purify. And we spoke about the concept of purification last time. Okay? Ideally, I will say ideally, you would never invest in anything that is even slightly objectionable. Okay, practically speaking, that's just very difficult to happen. Right? A lot of people do have limitations in their 401k plan of what they can invest in. So it's hard for us to say don't invest in anything that's objectionable or has some component of it that's objectionable, just because that's going to be very hard to apply. If I have a financial background major, what courses will you advise to take it in Islamic finance, any institute or certification suggestion, please? I mean, Islamic finance, if you have a financing background or major, it's you understand the concepts, but for the Islamic rulings, you do have to study with someone. I mean, there are certain books that you can read to get an introduction to it. Last time I mentioned Mufti Taqi an introduction to Islamic finance. It's written for the general audience. It's in English. It's a good starter, but it is more basic. If you do want to get more advanced Islamic finance, then you really would have to study with certain scholars to get those details. There are courses online like Ethica, 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 and there's probably others as well, but Ethica, and other organizations, they offer courses to get certified in AOFE standards, and that's one of the things that I had done to get certified in AOFE standards, and that that's it's something I would recommend for someone who wants to get into the industry, but it's also something I would recommend after studying in person with ulama as well, as opposed to kind of going just purely based off of the courses. Okay. Do we have to give purification toward all gains from stocks, even if they are AOFE compliant, or is it only if they have haram? Purification applies. I think this may be the last question we'll be able to take. Purification does apply even if it's AOFE compliant, because AOFE compliant has percentage on less than 5% of the income may be haram, right? But it doesn't say 0% will be haram. So even in an AOFE compliant investment, there is still going to be purification that needs to be done, and that's part of the AOFE standards, that you must do that purification. So yes, purification does apply even when if it's AOFE compliant, but know that we're talking about that in dividends. We're not talking about that for capital gains. Okay. Referring non-Muslims to, are we? Okay, it is. Sorry. it is at 6. We will kind of pause here. But generally we won't refer anyone toward getting a loan. You should kind of handle this, in a wiser manner, where you can just tell them that, listen, you don't offer financing and they have to bring their finances. But you don't have to tell them go get a loan. You just say, listen, you have to bring your finances, and they can look into whether their finances are. And if they, if they get a loan and they bring it, if they bring money to pay that they took as a loan that they're going to pay interest on, again, remember that principle that what's going to happen thereafter and they're paying interest to the bank that they got the loan from is irrelevant to your transaction with them. You sold them a car and they paid you money for it, that's fine. Okay. Inshallah, I will stop here, and then inshallah next session we'll do some of the applications of these financing models that we spoke about, and again we'll do questions in the same format that we have done today. Subhanallah bihamdik, subhanakallah bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wa alaykum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallahu Khairun, Mufti Abrar. Inshallah, we can take a quick break before the next session. Couple minutes, inshallah, and then we'll begin our next session with Dr. Abdullah.